Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Lord, through thy theophany, you revealed yourself to the world. Continue to let us reveal through your ministry of OCF your truth, leading all those and keeping all those connected to you with faith, love, and prayer and worship. And continue to guide all our endeavors, our ministries, through your name, O Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. The Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ is among us.
Thank you, Father Miles. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Christina Andreessen. I'm the manager for chapter relations for Orthodox Christian Fellowship. And Father Miles is our acting national chaplain right now. And I'll introduce our panelists in just 1 minute. But before we get started, I just want to go over a little bit of the technology of how these things are going to work. We have, you'll see that you'll have a Q&A that you can ask questions at any point during the webinar. The questions, either I will answer them myself via text. If you don't see your question getting answered, that means we're saving it for the end for Anne and Deacon Michael to answer for you all. You also see at the top of your screen, you should see a button that says raise your hand. There's a couple of times that Anne and Deacon Michael would really like your participation. So please, when they ask for it, hit that button, raise your hand, and I will be able to bring you up on the screen to be able to answer their questions live. So because we'd love to really hear some of your stories. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to write in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll try to help direct any questions you have about how the technology works. Okay, well, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our two panelists today speaking to us about mentoring strong Orthodox leaders. First, we have Anne Bezzerides, who is the director of the Office of Vocation and Ministry and was the founding director of OVM's Crossroads Summer Institute. She edited Christ at Work, and her research interests include Orthodox theological perspectives on vocation and ministry, the history and contemporary practice of Christian religious education, hermeneutic of retrieval for the use of patristic texts for the formation of today's educators, evaluation methodologies and practices for ministry, Christian faith and higher education, and youth ministry. And with her is Deacon Michael Tishel, who is the assistant director of the OVM and the director of Crossroad. He's also a lecturer at Hellenic College. He has been involved in youth ministry both on the high school and college level for 9 years, working as a youth and young adult leader for his parish, for his diocese, and as a student leader for Orthodox Christian Fellowship. So we welcome both of you and your expertise, and with that, I'll turn it over to you completely.
Thanks so much, Christina. It's such a gift to be with you all. We saw an earlier version of the registration list, so it was fun to see so many names of people we know and love, and those of you we don't know, we're sure we love you, and we're thankful for the work that you do with college students. We see them as high school students coming to Crossroad, the ones a lot of whom become leaders on campus, and are just so grateful that the people we know and love, we can hand off to amazing leaders on campuses, and are very grateful to everything you do, and please keep at it. Anything we can do to help further your work, we'd love to. So I want to start by reviewing the paragraph that was sent out to sort of advertise this. We didn't write it, Christina gave it to us. We like it, Christina, very much, it's awesome. And as I do so, think about, as you listen to this paragraph, what are these areas that really strike you? We'd love to hear from maybe 3 of you, 3 or 4, who could name something in this description that just hits you of, yeah, I really need to hear something about this. This is my biggest struggle. This is my biggest sticking point or an area of growth. All right, so I'm rereading the sort of description of this, and think about that, and then we'll turn it to you to get some input from you. So here it is. Do you wish your OCF leaders were stronger, more consistent from year to year, more inclined to collaboration, better communicators, deeper thinkers? Join OCF for this 1-hour session on cultivating young leaders in your OCF chapter. Explore the importance of mentorship in the lives of young people in the church, and discover how to prepare your OCFers to be leaders in our church and the world today. So this is one of those raise your hand times. we thought we'd try it, and just if we have any hand raisers who would share something that they'd love to dig into.
Here we go. I think you're on mute, Christina. Yeah.
I'm on. This is Father John Emanuelson. How you doing?
Good. So good to see you, Father John.
Yeah, it's always great to hear from y'all. The leadership that we're trying to develop in our parishes are it's a really uphill struggle. In a lot of ways, we need to have our parents of our youth on board as much as we need our youth, because the parents are not leaving or allowing the youth oftentimes to develop their own leadership skills. And this is, I feel, the cutting edge of campus ministry is in the middle school and high school years, because they need to develop their own sense of ownership of their faith, ownership of leadership, and we oftentimes have parents that would rather make the decisions for them. So is there any efforts underway to develop leadership in the high school and middle school ages?
Great question. Okay, good one.
We'll have Father Anthony go, and then Lindsay.
All right. Hi, Ann and Deacon Michael. This is a great opportunity, because it is kind of baffling on campus these days, because everyone's opinion is equal in this postmodern situation we're in. So I think leadership is going to look different than it has from our generation, because kids don't feel like they can tell other kids or influence them in a way. So we have to recognize maybe new leadership techniques. So making stronger leaders and more consistent appealed to me. And so I'm looking forward to what you have to share in that regard.
Great.
That's great.
Great. Thank you. And you could be running this session better than we could, so forgive us.
I am wondering how we can help our leaders to be consistent and reliable, but in a way that's empowering. And there's always the fear of, projects just not happening, like, them not executing, and just where you draw those lines, I guess, about where you kind of step in, how much it's appropriate to save the day and if something is not going to go over. That's my question.
Great. It's so hard for me to not want to jump in right now,
Right.
but actually on that specific note, if I don't get a chance to tell you now, I have an anecdote for you. That's great. So I'll come back. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Those are good. We'll try to hit them, and I'm sure there are many more amazing ideas. So we are going to focus on, on that, Maria, you mentioned the consistency, and we sort of shortened Christina's description to say, okay, we've got some C's in here: consistent, collaborative, communicative, and contemplative, or reflective. So we're going to get to that. But before we do that, we wanted to back up a little bit, dig into, we'll give you some quick anecdotes of, one of the practices that I'm trying to get better at is, when we have a big question, study the bright lights of what works of things. When have you mentored a student that it really worked, and what was it about it that worked? How were you mentored and it really worked? And so Deacon Mike and I thought we both, whatever happened to us in college worked, because we're still here kicking away, loving our church work. And so the people who mentored us in church. So we thought we'd dig into that a little bit. just for a few minutes. And as we do that, also be thinking for yourselves. I wish we had longer time and more face-to-face time, but dig into your own memories of who mentored you when you were in these 18 to 23-year-old, from 18 to 23. So
Yeah, great. Yeah, so there are definitely a number of influences and mentors in my own college experience that I think really impacted my understanding of faith in the world and whatnot. But a couple come to mind that I just want to mention briefly. The first is a woman named Julie, who I went to a small non-denominational liberal arts college north of Boston called Gordon College. And Julie was one of the associate deans at this college, and she actually also happened to be Orthodox. So she was a very kind of influential mentoring figure to a lot of us on campus. And she would invite us over to her house, cook dinners for us, things like that. She was a very reflective person. And so she was also very kind of thoughtful in the way that she approached a lot of these conversations. But in particular, I wanted to highlight one aspect of our friendship, or the mentoring relationship that she had to me and many others. I think it was my senior year. I just started showing up at the door of her office every Thursday morning in between classes, and I knew that she was going to be around. And I just showed up and asked if she had a few minutes, and we would chat. She had a little tea kettle in her office that she would always make us some tea, and it would kind of overlook the beautiful quad on campus, and we just have these very calm, relaxed, thoughtful conversations about life and faith and everything. And I had been doing this for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and at a certain point I came and we were just chatting, and she sort of looked at me and she was like, "Mike, is there any particular reason why you're coming?" and I thought, well, that's a good question. There was maybe I hadn't even really reflected on it myself, but there was a sense in which I felt deeply that there was something about her as a person that I wanted to experience. She was an older lady, that was a very faithful person, a very person with a lot of integrity. And I kind of just wanted to sit there and have a conversation with her, I think, with no particular agenda. And I think I distinctly remember many of those conversations, but most of all, just the overall impression that her posture and her love kind of left on me. And then after graduating from Gordon, I did my master's degree in Thessaloniki, Greece, in theology. And there's a wonderful priest there who was kind of a mentor figure to a lot of us foreigners, named Father Spiridon. And again, someone who was someone that I identified as someone who I wanted to learn from, but also who was very clear about who was the true mentor, I guess you could say, as far as the work of the Holy Spirit in guiding us to all truth, and the kind of mutuality of mentoring, which we'll mention a little bit more about later, and the sense that we're all kind of being mentored, certainly while still maintaining the appropriate kind of relationship and boundaries and things like that. But also realizing that the mentors were being mentored, which was huge. So those were some of my.
So good. And I went to a small liberal arts college in Vermont where the closest Orthodox church was 45 minutes away, and it was hard to get to. I didn't have a car. I had been, with the blessing of my parents' spiritual father and some support from my parents, involved in some non-denominational church ministry in high school. And so it wasn't foreign for me to participate in InterVarsity Christian Fellowship at my college campus. And I think it's interesting, I recently spoke to the Assembly of Bishops in October on this topic, and got some input from some of you. And one of the things Father Anthony did say that I played for them was the importance of just anything we can do to grow full-time ministry among OCF. chapters on college campuses, because I cannot express how influential it was that there was a full-time presence of an intervarsity staff person on campus who thankfully was well picked for our campus and led me actually to be more Orthodox than I was when I started. But that love and care from this man and his wife, they had 3 girls. We were like, you went to Julie's house, we were invited to Greg and Susan's house. I remember hot onion dip. And a messy house. It was a lively house full of, children and joy and love. Bible studies that made me mad because the answers weren't terribly Orthodox, and, challenges around the holiness of Mary that, again, made me more Orthodox. So it was interesting. But so just that presence of being was huge. It included there was a computer science professor who led a book study on C.S. Lewis in his office. That time, hugely influential. The time of an Orthodox family friend who emailed me when I had questions, long emails, to respond to my direct questions. So email mentoring, phenomenal. And then my senior year, I found a small OCA parish in Claremont, New Hampshire. And at the time I was exploring wanting to go on, what I was going to do afterwards. And this wonderful parishioner, I said, maybe youth ministry, I'm really drawn to that. And he said, well, if you want to go do that, you better know what you're talking about. And that's what slowly led me to seminary. But just pivotal conversations. It's such an amazing time of life. The reason we love this Crossroads Summer Institute for high school juniors and seniors is that they're just so raw with the best stuff of life. And colleges, I think, continues to be that, because they're having these intense conversations that as they get into their later 20s, they begin to sort of shut down those conversations often. And so what a joy and a blessing it is to work with college students at these ages. So definitely. Why mentor at all?
Right. This is a good question. I think it is helpful. Ann and I were talking a little bit about this whole question of why to even mention the why. And probably many of you, probably all of you, are doing this, on top of a million other things that you're doing. Working with college students, have a lot going on. A lot of different projects and important ministries and things like that. And so, I think there's a sense in which mentoring in and of itself might feel like less of a central or essential or necessary component when you just have to get the programs running and get people there and get the logistical aspects taken care of, just to kind of have the bare minimum, as it were. But I think hopefully through our own sharing of our anecdotes, of our own college experience, and maybe your own reflection of good mentors in your lives, that can kind of evoke this sense of really deep and sustained impact that you have received and have had, on other people. The former president here at Hellenic College Holy Cross, Father Nick Triantafilou, in one of his last addresses that he gave to the faculty and staff here, had this kind of what I would consider a moment of inspiration, where he all of a sudden sort of faced the faculty, the teachers here at Hellenic College Holy Cross, and gave them this beautiful sort of vision for what it meant to teach, which I think is also very applicable as far as a why in regards to mentoring. And basically what he said is, there are people in the world who build buildings, build companies, things that are very measurable in many senses. I mean, you're an architect or you're a contractor or something, you build a building, you see the fruits of your labor in an extremely measurable way. But he said, you teachers, you are the people that sort of build people. And you cultivate the personhood of these students. And he said that the words that you speak and that you offer in your classes, those are like seeds that are planted within the minds, hearts, and souls of these human beings. And then these human beings, they go out into the broader world, and they have an impact and an influence on their families, on their communities, and so that those words that you speak can have a generational impact. And so, you know, again, it's not quite as tangible as just developing a good program or having a meeting and things like that, but just those seemingly insignificant kingdom building words and actions, you know, really do have an impact. And I'm sure we've all had those experiences where someone, you know, a month, a year, years later comes back to us and says, hey, you know, that one thing that you said, you know, and maybe we don't even remember what it was, or maybe it wasn't even meant the way that they received it. That really, you know, changed the way I thought of, you know, life or something like that. So that why, as far as, you know, kind of cultivating the personhood of people, that's a little bit perhaps less tangible on some levels, but extremely influential and significant on others.
So we're just going to give, just for clarity, and because we're from an academic institution, we're going to do a quick screen share to share a definition with you of mentoring that we have from an article that we would be happy to, I don't know if that's in the way, but okay. Great. Happy to, we can send Christina the link so you don't have to copy this down, but it's from, I think Amy McCreath is the author. Does that sound right? And just definition of mentoring that we love that we can sort of read together. But I'll read the first paragraph if you want to go for the second.
Definitely.
Mentoring is a form of friendship, but friendship with a particular end in mind. The mentor companions and supports the protege in discovering and claiming his or her authentic self. Mentoring relationships anchor the vision of the potential self, as the mentor offers both insight and emotional support. For young adults, mentors embody and inspire the possibility of committed and meaningful adulthood. For older adults, mentors embody and inspire the possibility of committed and meaningful life within a particular profession or through a particular era of life.
Mentoring is almost always mutual in practice. The protege is learning from the mentor, but the mentor is also learning from the protege. As Sue Ann Steffi Morrow, chaplain at Lawrenceville School, points out, quote, a good mentor is ready for the magic of reciprocity. Indeed, one of the qualities of a mentor is awareness that they themselves are still a work in progress, still moving towards authenticity and deeper wisdom. Each mentor and each relationship is unique, but generally, good mentors exhibit certain qualities. They are good listeners. They are not afraid to ask hard questions and never force their answers on a protege. Mentors share stories from their own lives and the lives of others in ways that open possibilities for while not getting in the way of the protege. Mentors are honest about their struggles and their hopes and make lots of room to hear about the struggles and hopes of proteges. Most importantly, mentors are present. They show up, make time in their schedules, and are intentional in their commitment to their relationship with a protege.
So, you know, I think if we emphasize something from that, we were both taken by just, you know, how for each of you, for each of us, our own mentoring practice, our own who we are as a mentor will be so unique for each one of us. And I think that's really important. You know, we use a lot the Strengths Finder inventory assessment, and I know OCF uses it with the Student Leadership Board. We've been using it for almost 15 years now, both of us, which is pretty wild. But I just even knowing as a leader, if you haven't taken that assessment, taking it and knowing that you're going to have these characteristics that will guide the way you mentor, that's going to be different from the next person, either the way you were mentored, or you might imitate some of it, but just not feeling like you have to fit into a specific type of perfect mentor, but rather just own your own way of being. And the other thing that doesn't come up in that quote, but is just powerful, is just prayer for mentees and mentors, and just everybody who's in your OCF, that the foundation of any even hope for mentoring any of them is prayer for them. And if you never do anything else but pray for them, we have to understand that that's a kind of the most important mentoring. So, and also that in and through that prayer, clarity for any action, any words, any wisdom would come, but not without it. So, okay, 4 categories from session description, and think about each of them. And we'll just talk through some of the things we've done in our ministry here in the Office of Vocation and Ministry in Brookline, Atlantic College, Holy Cross. And these are just really ways to spark your ideas to see if there's anything that could fit with your work. So the first one is consistency. Inconsistency is part of OCF, right? It's built in. Students will leave every 4 years. If it's good, they'll stay for 4 years. So our thought is there a way that we've got to turn that challenge of turnover into a huge opportunity, and really think of the turnover as a gift to you and to OCF. It does change your job a little bit. It means that in many ways you are a leadership scout. You've got to scout for leadership qualities in and among the people you're working with. And then consistency is really, I mean, the onus, there's a certain sense in which the onus is on us as leaders to do training to help with consistency. You know, this is literally, I'm about to, I think, finish 15 years of this work in the OVM, and the staff and interns across the last 15 years, like I've worked with people for years, and then to lose them is just heartbreaking, you know? And it's hard to have people I've trained leave. I mean, if for only is that I've forgotten what I've told what to whom. And so it's hard to keep track of everything. So what I've been coached to do, which has been super useful, and actually one of our donors to the OVM said, you've got to think of the turnover as good, because the more people you're training, the more people are going out and actually having an impact on other people. And I was thinking about that, you know, that's so true for OCF. You have them at this precious time. You're not just training them to make the OCF run, you're training them for their future lives in any parish they're going to go into. The parallel is, you know, now I'm raising 3 sons, and I keep wanting to get lazy, and then I think about their poor future wives. And I think I got to get better. You know, I gotta hone how I parent them and how I interact with them, because I am setting their expectations for the rest of their life and their, you know, and so OCF, who do you want these young people to be as future engaged members of a parish, you know, as a very practical thing. You know, what skills can we give them now that would really really be useful in terms of the organization? This is sort of the icing on the cake, as opposed to the depth of it. But anyway, you know, little practical details over time. I'm trying, if I don't do it, I ask a team member to do it. When I tell somebody something, I ask them that it needs to get remembered, that we're starting to log it. We've got, like, Crossroads become very good at this. We've got a whole, like, what do we need to tell people for an event template for every event? We now, it took years to come up with, but we have an event template. So it's just, we could share it with you if you want it. It's basically and it would be useful to share with you, because it's actually, we have college students, you know, we've got a faith and learning symposium coming up in February that's geared for college students. It's the probably 12th year we're doing it. Yeah. We're training a different student to run it every year. And so we've got our categories, and they go through the categories, and you walk through the categories with them and say what it is. Now, if this makes you want to run in the other direction, just even thinking about this kind of planning level, find somebody else who will get excited about planning, some adult in your parish who loves planning, who could walk alongside you and say, okay, I'm the planning person. I'm going to like help the planning aspects of OCF things. Anyway,
Yeah.
You know, I just over and over again for consistency and turnover, I think, you know, how are ways that we can capture what we've taught people over the years and continue to teach them, even if that's using my phone to record something. Anyway.
Yes.
So collaborative.
Yes, I think that's a good transition into this quality of being collaborative and cultivating a mentoring community of collaboration. As Anne mentioned, we use StrengthsFinder and have done so for many years. And one of the beauties of StrengthsFinder is that it identifies, as you probably know, it identifies the top 5, what they call signature themes, or kind of qualities of the person taking the assessment. And so you can get a sense through this on some level of the different inclinations and proclivities of the various members of your leadership in your OCFs. And so, you know, I mean, there are many things that could potentially frustrate, you know, a chaplain or an OCF leader about college student leadership as far as inconsistency and things like that. But one thing that might be a frustration that could be potentially resolved is giving a job to someone who has an inclination for something else. So as Anne mentioned, as far as, you know, organizing events, like we try to, you know, curate, you could say, the people who are doing different events and say, is this someone who loves to stay organized? Is this someone who loves, you know, to kind of, you know, who's kind of very self-motivated? And if so, they're the go-to person for our events, as opposed to someone who's more of a deep thinker, you know, more kind of philosophically minded, who might want to lead a discussion, you know, and things like that. So being aware of the diversity of gifts and talents of your OCF members and leadership, whether it's through StrengthsFinder or some other assessment tool, or just observation, I think is a huge way of being able to cultivate that community of collaboration.
Finding that person who will get everybody there.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
their thing is getting everybody there. Like they can do it. It's on social media. They're all over social media. They will get people there.
Definitely. Let
them get people there. You know, that sort of using their talents. One of the things, and this goes back to the sort of the hands raised at the beginning, but one of the things actually my high school mentor said to me, which stuck with me, is you can't expect something of someone without communicating the expectation. And I think that is for all of these, when you think of consistency, well, if the consistency is we want these students to show up consistently, or we want them to consistently plan events, or, you know, for collaboration, we want them to be collaborative as they plan and run events. Well, if we're not communicating that, if we're not spelling out what we mean by that, then we really can't expect it of them. And that's why I say, as a leader, like the more you can figure out, okay, what is the lesson you want to teach them? And then, okay, you got it. And then they get it, which is wonderful. But 2 years later, they're all gone and you have to reteach it. And so capturing those lessons that you've owned that really make a lot of sense, and continuing to teach around those in effective ways. What was the story that you told as a leader that finally got them to click and be, you know, communicative? How can you capture that? How can you remember that story and know to teach it 2 years later? Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's a thought. The third one is communicative. You know, and this is where I was going, is, you know, the question for you all is, what would that look like for you? What are your best hope for how communicative your leaders will be? And have you told them that? Have you told your student leaders what you expect of them? Can you model being communicative? That's where it kicks me, you know, too many assumptions. And be honest if you can't, because of bandwidth. One of my favorite words is bandwidth, you know, because it just, you know, for those of you who have parishes that you're at full time, and God bless you. You want to work with college students too. It's amazing. Thank you. For those of you who have full-time jobs, you know, also thank you. Thank you so much. You know, one of the things we'll touch on later is just, well, I'll say it now, but if you can't because of bandwidth, is there someone who can? You know, one of the reasons OVM has thrived over the years is that I literally, as a mom with 3 kids, I couldn't do everything, couldn't even try. I've got a husband who's got a crazy schedule, and I had to just share. I had to just say, I can't do this all. I can't, like, I have to keep the office going. I can't mentor the students that I want to. I've got to have people who are better than I am at mentoring, doing mentoring, you know? So how can you think as creative, like almost more important than even striving yourself to be a perfect mentor to a few kids would be, what if you could multiply the mentoring effort that you're currently thinking on with your campus now, and thinking, okay, there are 3 adults in my parish who I could train to be with me, who would then be mentors to, who would be amazing mentors. Or maybe 1 faculty member. Is there a staff member at the college you work at who's Orthodox, who you could draw in? You know, how can you multiply the mentors? How can you turn your parish, if their OCF kids are coming to your parish, into more of a mentoring community? Anyways, back to the kids and communicative, back to the college students and communicative. Can you let them know right up front that the communication is on them? And then, you know, Maria, you had asked the question earlier about just consistency and what do you do? Father Paul Lundberg from Atlanta, Georgia, he was sort of one of the guys behind the Connect conference that recently happened for young adults. And he tells the story of hitting a point in stagnation where the planning sort of waned, but the date was on the calendar and people were coming, you know, and the planning waned, and it just got to this panic mode. And these are young adults, these are not even college students anymore. And he just gathered them all and he was like, listen, if you need to step off the planning committee so that somebody else needs to step on, please no hard feelings, but just, this is the time to step up or step off, you know. And there are going to be times when that's, you know, you've got to do that sort of parenting move that I think is really, really, really important. So.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing right there?
Please.
I would say, to go off of that, in my experience, often students are intimidated by adults. They haven't quite found their own footing as adults yet. So sometimes they're afraid, especially if you're a clergyman, to admit what's really going on that's gotten them behind. They might not tell you why they haven't finished the task. They might just keep putting it off because they're really busy at school, or something is going on in their family, or they just totally forgot. But they're afraid to admit that because they don't maybe yet quite feel that they're on equal ground as an adult in the conversation. And so doing something like what you said Father Paul did in Atlanta, of giving them a space to say what's going on, of just saying, like, listen, you're never going to be in trouble with me for being a student and doing your homework. Or I'm never going to be upset that something's not getting done. It is harder for me though when you don't tell me why something isn't getting done. That's been really effective for me. The student leadership board knows at all times, like, I am never going to be upset with any excuse. They can give me any excuse they want for why something's not getting done. They can't tell me nothing. When they ignore me completely, that's when we have a real issue. And that has really made them feel open to if I ping them and say, hey, what's going on with this? And they can't get to it, for them to just tell me what's going on. I totally forgot, or I have 5 exams this week and there's no way I'm going to think about it until next week. They're very honest with me then about what's going on. And I think that just like breaking down the intimidation about approaching a priest or an older adult about what's actually going on is really helpful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
All right, we want to leave some time for questions, so we're going to fly through contemplation and reflection, which is unfortunately the best thing. But I want to get to our last 3 little points at the end there. So
yeah, all I want to say just briefly about this is how undervalued and kind of maybe overlooked oftentimes developing contemplative, reflective, and deep thinking leaders can be. So really trying to create a culture of deep reflection within the OCF community, whether that's like exploring different enduring questions about the nature of life and just kind of getting them thinking about those kinds of things. Or,
and I'll just a quick plug here. If
Yep.
you're interested, Deacon Mike for years did something in our office called Coffee Talk, where just picking some enduring question that's just the provocative question, when the question's so good with no clear answer that the students just want to come and talk about it.
Yeah.
But just the provocative question without a dogmatic answer, that is, it's not, I mean, there's another definite place for doctrine, dogma, but these answers don't have that clear. They're just, we
Yeah.
can share the list of questions
Yes.
with you, but because it was gathered over time, but those sort of provocative questions, we actually, one of our former Crossroads staff members has used them, I think with his OCF or youth group, and they're great, just that sort of super reflective.
Yeah, developing the muscle of ruminating.
Yeah.
Being able to chew over a really important topic without giving kind of like a soundbite kind of knee-jerk reactive.
The two other like staples of our work that we could not do without, we wouldn't even know how to live without them, would be journaling as part of everything we do. So when we give, it's the space to get the introvert and the extroverts caught up, so that it's not all the extroverts talking in a group. It's the space to give the, journaling time, lets the introverts think about what they want to say. It also just gives them space to reflect. So writing, and then the be still time and solitude, just times to be quiet, silent. Huge. So, and then the great thing about that is if you've cultivated this sort of love for reflection and just getting students to think deeply and question really critically question the college culture around them, stuff like that, then you even get to do that with the program itself. So, also realizing that when you give students leadership responsibility, that's going to be an entranceway into their own vocational, spiritual, theological growth through these individual and small leadership conversations that they will have with you when that comes out, through their insecurities about how well they did something through OCF, or through, a question that was raised that came out, or something somebody said to them during the event. And then the deep thinking actually even comes to, how did that all go? What are we trying to do as an OCF? And what do we want to do as we're planning? Why do we want to do it? Why do we want a whole series of social gatherings? Wait, do we want to pray? How are we going to pray? Why? What do our fellow students need who are not Orthodox? Are we even thinking about them? Like cultivating the deep reflection around that. And we just have made it a habit of this wonderful, joyful practice of reviewing everything we've done then. With our student workers, every Crossroads staff member has to submit a multi-page thing after the summer on what went well, activity by activity, and what didn't, what their own stuff was. They get time to talk with Deacon Mike and Kira about it. How did it go, and how did the program go? How did they go, within it, and trying to discern who they are through a process of all that. So we wanted to touch on that. Three things that Deacon Mike and I could not avoid as we were thinking about sort of mentoring student leaders. Number one,
food. Huge.
It
really is.
Good food.
Yeah. It's part and parcel with hospitality and welcoming people in, and college students are always hungry and underfed.
Yep.
In some ways.
Yep. Yeah. If you just can find somebody who loves cooking, that would do it. Just the earning this time and space to mentor well. And as we think back on our own mentoring, it was always connected with good food.
Seriously, everything.
Always.
Yep.
So, and then I mentioned this one before, but multiply your mentors, because we all just need it so badly. And I will say that, no, it's the next point before I go there.
Sure. As I think we've been talking about this mentoring, the kind of presupposition is this notion of sparking in students and mentors the desire to fall in love with wisdom. I think is a, you know, a real kind of basic presupposition that maybe we haven't actually tasted the sweet fruit of wisdom, you know, and being able to actually fall in love with that ourselves through, you know, wise people and wise texts, but also to spark in our students that love as well.
Yeah, and Father Anthony, as I sort of reflect on your question about this is a new generation who won't value mentoring in people as much as potentially prior generations, because they've grown up teaching their parents how to use computers and devices, being able to find anything at the touch of their fingertips on Wikipedia. So really, you know, how do you value mentoring? And I think we do think the entranceway into that is how do we help them want to fall in love with wisdom and pursue that. And I think that's part of it is naming it and, you know, teaching it as a concept. Part of it is always going to be hard in college because it's really life after. You know, I think it's some of the struggles after that are, it becomes clearer. But, you know, it's funny, I was asked to speak to young adults soon, and I was thinking, okay, what would I say? And if there was one thing I'd say to people in their 20s, it's don't really listen to advice of your peers. You know, like we all want to counsel each other when we're in our 20s, but really everybody's just walking around with their head cut off, you know? So, I mean, there are some who, like, if your friend is on Wall Street and doing very, very well, you might want to ask them a couple financial questions, but don't ask them, you know, who they should date. I mean, you know, it's just sort of some of the, you know, that look to people who are a couple decades ahead of you for life wisdom and how they sorted things out, and helping students realize the profound value in that a community of wisdom, and that's what's great about parish life. That if you can't, you know, then understanding that about parish life too, about being with, you know, can be a huge antidote to the college fumes of all people your own age. So resources for continued learning that we love are, you know, this one's out of the evangelical tradition, Bill Hybels, you may have heard one, but I want to write the Orthodox version at some point, but it's called Volunteer Revolution by Bill Hybels. It's really worth a read on sort of the struggle to deal with volunteers, and yet how you are drawing out sort of vocation and calling in people as you work with them. This book, we actually have a few extra copies, so if you want to connect with us, we could send them. We could probably get more. Life-Giving Mentors, it's by a guy named Tim Elmore. Deacon Mike and I were saying we could write we like a lot, we could critique some, but we don't do all of it well enough to actually have a value to critique it. So, and then we published this years ago in the Office, 2006, but it's actually some Orthodox faculty reflections on mentoring at Hellenic. Dimitri Katos has a little piece, Father Theodore Stylianopoulos has a little piece, Tim Petitsis. There was one more. Oh, we'll send you this essay. Will you actually grab Eastern Orthodox Christianity? And the one more quick plug is that for deep reflection, and at the beginning of 2017, the Office published this book here, Eastern Orthodox Christianity and American Higher Education. And it goes through, it's a collection of essays by scholars and academics at institutions across the US and a couple in the world, who just thinking about the relationship between faith and education for the Orthodox in the United States. So anyway, thank you for having us. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deacon Michael and Anne. If anyone has any questions, you feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to be brought up on video, or you can send them in the Q&A. And while we wait for any of those to come in, I just wanted to add one thing. One of my favorite books of scripture to read with college students, I read it first when I was in college, is The Wisdom of Sirach. And one of my favorite quotes to put out to young people is from chapter 6, which says, "If you are willing, my son, you will be taught. And if you apply yourself, you will be prudent. If you love to listen, you will wait with anticipation. And if you incline your ear, you will be wise." But then the part that I think strikes closest to me is it says, "Stand in an assembly of elders, and who is wise? Attach yourself to him, desire to listen to every divine narrative, and do not let proverbs of understanding escape you. If you see a man who has understanding, rise early in the morning, and let your foot wear out the threshold of his door." So I read that to you only to warn you that I am reading that to college students all the time, telling them to be looking for mentors, and then to wear out the threshold of that door. So I hope you have open doors. And I think that one thing that should be said then about mentorship is that it's not really efficient. It's not really going to get stuff done. I mean, hopefully in the process, these young people will learn to be better at planning events or answering emails. But really, mentorship is not a relationship that gets stuff done. It's not very efficient. If your hope at the end of this webinar was to be able to, now not have to think about OCF so much because your students are just going to take care of it for you, sorry. I think we've left you perhaps with a bigger task sometimes than you were counting on, but I think in the end it's worth it because you are preparing them or forming them to be real humans, as Deacon Michael said at the beginning. You're builders of people. And I think the last thing I wanted to add that we didn't really touch on, but to keep in mind that's part of this process, is to help young people walk through failure, because they are going to eventually drop the ball, probably more than once for you on something, an expectation you set for them. And not only modeling what it looks like to fail and to repent whenever you do the same, but also to help them own up to those things and to help them to not need to make excuses for the mistakes that they make, but to say, I made a mistake, and when I make one, this is what I do to make it right. I think is a really important part of this relationship, which I'm sure many of you as spiritual fathers are walking people through that process all the time. But again, I think it's hard for young people to be okay sometimes with when they have had an expectation set for them, knowing that it's okay to mess up. So that's all I will add. I have Father Anthony would like to ask a question, so we're going to promote him up here. Here he comes, I hope. There he is. Hi, Father Anthony.
Hi, Christina. And I want to thank you for putting these on because these are very valuable. I know you're finding your way through it, but they're so helpful. And I took lots of notes, and I want to thank Ann and Deacon Tishel for the work that they're doing and the help that they provide. I would add, and you didn't give yourself a plug, but the student leadership training in the summer is really good. We have to, as Ann said, first identify leaders early, but also take opportunities for leadership training because there's a lot of good material out there. And also, as George Matthews says, as a leadership training technique, you can watch me do it, you can do it with me, I'll watch you do it, and then you do it by yourself. So there's really good materials for leadership, so we have to connect them with it. And also, I think if we can close the loop, Ann was talking about all the people that pass through our hands, but is there any attention to an alumni, OCF Alumni Association? That I think would be really an important thing to tap into that, especially those who benefited so much from OCF. Thank you, and I'll take my question off the air.
I love it. I mean, Christina, I don't know if you're thinking about it. Again, for OCF generally, I think the bandwidth is the problem, and that's what we all hope and pray, that OCF's bandwidth will, by God's grace, be led to expand exponentially at some point. I do know, tiny anecdote, Father Cosmas Callis in the Chicago area, there's a ton of Northwestern grads. He's responsible for Northwestern OCF, and he wanted to do a Northwestern, wanted more, got the North, I forget exactly what the whole story, but got Northwestern alums to, both sort of be involved in the OCF and also help contribute funding to make OCF campus activities possible. Pizza and stuff like that. It's almost nothing, to make a lot happen for the kids. So I love the idea of alumni initiatives for OCF.
Yes, and I will give a plug for the Summer Leadership Institute at the very end, but we have one more question from Father John Emanuelson. He asks, has anyone tackled the idea of falling in love with God and each other?
Ooh, has anyone tackled the idea of falling in love with God and each other?
Well, they're two different questions, maybe, and each other.
Is there any context for that?
Father John, I'm just going to promote you up so you can answer their question.
I know Deacon Mike, has been.
I would love to do it for a retreat theme.
Okay.
And I think it would be an amazing discussion.
Yeah.
That's my hope.
Yeah. There's a Christian philosopher out of Calvin College by the name of James K.A. Smith, who wrote a book called "We Are What We Love," among many others. But I've been using that a lot in.
It's "You Are What You Love," right?
You are what you love.
Yeah.
Exactly. We are what we love. You are what. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been using that a lot, both in teaching and also in crossroad stuff, because it really hits on some fundamental points about who we are as human beings. The core of who we are is to be lovers, and yes, we have the intellectual capacity as well, but we're not reduced to that. And so this whole notion of how even marketing campaigns and things they bypass our intellect and go straight to our desires, kind of trying to tug at our heartstrings as far as our yearnings and what it means to live the happy life and things and the good life. And so that's something that we've talked about, but I've really drawn a lot from James K.A. Smith in thinking about that philosophically. And then there's a number of Orthodox theologians and spiritual writers, I think, that address that beautifully as well. But yeah, it's definitely something I think that we've been thinking a lot about on our end of things, for sure.
Father John, if you're interested in hosting a retreat on that topic, I'd love to help you plan it with one of my student leaders. So just send me an email. So thank you again for your presentation. It was very helpful for me. I love listening to both of you speak at all times. And thank you all, our attendees, for being here. We are going to be posting the recording from all of the webinars, so if you missed anything or you want to go back and review any of this, you'll be able to in a couple of weeks. I'll send you all a follow-up email later this week with all of the resources that were mentioned in the webinar. And if you ever have any questions, specifically about an OCF chapter or working with your OCF, I'm always available. You can always email me at christina@ocf.net. I can also connect you with Anne or with Deacon Michael if you have anything you'd like to follow up with either of them. And then, as Father Anthony briefly mentioned, we have two leadership opportunities, big leadership opportunities for your students. The first being applying for and being part of the Student Leadership Board. If you don't already know, we have a team of 18 student leaders at the national level who help run this ministry, who help make it happen, who expand our bandwidth. And the applications for that will come out in February 20th. And any student who's on the Student Leadership Board then automatically attends our Summer Leadership Institute. But we do open it up to other students. It's opened up to a limited number of 50 slots. 18 of those get taken up with Student Leadership Board members, so it's pretty limited, but we kind of want to keep it that way for now. And it's at the end of August. I should have had it up in front of me, 13th through the 18th, I think, or maybe 15th through the 18th. I'm not remembering the exact dates. And we will bring up the students to the St. Iakovos Retreat Center in Kansasville, Wisconsin for 4 days of answering this question of what does it mean to be a young Orthodox leader in OCF, the church, and the world. So we hope that you consider having your best and brightest apply for our Student Leadership Board or sponsor them to attend the Summer Leadership Institute this summer, so we can send them back to you a little bit more prepared for the work that God is calling all of us to. So thank you everyone for attending. We're going to let Father Miles close us in prayer now, and we hope to hear from you via email or in the future.
The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and we thank you, Lord, for this time that you've given us to share the faith and to learn from one another and to treasure you in our hearts, so that out of that comes a ministry that is sincere and true and loving, guiding and directing all the hearts of those students who come to us, that they may be drawn to you through us, and we may be adequate vessels for your ministry. We ask this through your name, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, amen. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Christ is among us.
So never shall be.
Shall we? Thank you, everyone.